Hello everybody and welcome to TJ's Lego Room, and today I am excited to bring you another mock in the Final Order fleet that I've created. I'm super excited to jump into the details, but before we go too far, I did want to share with you a little bit of backstory. I hope you can be patient just for a couple minutes while I get through that. As many of you know, I was not thrilled with the amount of new starship designs in the Rise of Skywalker. I've mentioned it multiple times, both here and on the podcast I do with my brother-in-law. Raising Nerds, if you feel so inclined to look that up. But particularly when it came to the bad guys, I really didn't feel like there was a lot of innovation as far as new starship designs. That's why I started creating my Final Order fleet. It started with the Javelin, which evolved eventually into the Wrath. And while that doesn't sound like very many ships right now, I actually have 4 more vehicle designs and ship designs at various stages that will hopefully round out a pretty awesome fleet for the Final Order. And today is one of those 4 ships that I'm showing you. I pretty much always wanted the Javelin to be the well-rounded fighter of the Final Order, kind of an answer to the Resistance X-Wing. A good balance of speed, durability, and firepower. The Wrath is obviously also the bomber, but something didn't quite feel right about the way I was designing the fleet. So for some reason it didn't feel like it was an evolution of the Empire. Because the Empire had a doctrine of overwhelming numbers, cheap replaceable fighters. And while the Javelin makes a great ship, it really has too many systems and parts that would make it difficult to build en masse, especially for an Empire in exile type situation. So I started playing with the idea of a stripped down version of the Javelin, one that would cost less to build but still put up a pretty good fight. However, this started to create a paradox for me. While the Final Order is a descendant of the Empire, it doesn't really have the resources, especially when it comes to personnel, that the Empire used to have. So in my mind, the Final Order has a limited number of pilots, and each one would you would need to take care of each pilot very well and protect them because it is a finite asset that you have. The Javelin makes sense from that perspective with the hyperdrives and shields and all around being a better TIE fighter, but those two military doctrines no longer jive with each other. The answer actually was pretty obvious when I thought about it later, but I didn't actually put it together myself until I saw a video by the Templin Institute on YouTube that reimagined the First Order. In that video, they suggested that instead of a bunch of stormtroopers, you would actually have a commander stormtrooper, but then he would be commanding a platoon or squad of battle droids or some type of battle droid. And that's when it finally clicked in my head. A droid starfighter, of course. It can be smaller, cheaper, and way more replaceable than a manned ship. Of course, there are some disadvantages to droids, so having them fly alongside Javelins and Wraths, acting as little swarm fighters that would escort or be part of a mini squad with a Javelin or Wrath actually kind of made sense. So behold, my Trident droid starfighter. Now, I will go ahead and share with you, thank you so much for being patient with me as I got through that. I feel like you needed some backstory on why I decided to go this route. But there's actually a whole nother story, well, a smaller story, behind the design of the ship. And I'm going to share that with you because, honestly, when we look here, it's a pretty small ship. And there's not a ton of design choices available when you build a ship this small. But obviously, once I decided on a droid starfighter, the designs really started going nuts in my head, trying to use the inspiration from what we see in the Clone Wars to what we see in the prequels and as far as droids. But a comment on one of my other YouTube videos said that the Final Order needs an interceptor. This is not the interceptor. That's on the way. But suggested that the interceptor could be like a TIE Defender style. Well, that really threw me down the rabbit hole of 3-winged ships. And one of the cool parts about it is as I started to mess around with 3-winged ships, I suddenly came up with a name for the ship, and I kind of started to build the ship around the name, which was the Trident Droid Starfighter. So I wanted it to have those 3 prongs for a trident, right? it also was kind of cool because since it would be escorting ships like the Javelin, you know, you have Javelins and Tridents, you know, very similar weapons. So the naming convention actually worked really well. We just won't talk about the Wrath Bomber. With the help of my patrons, I ended up selecting the final design fairly quickly after I got a prototype built. However, while their final product and what they had helped me with is going to be going towards the Interceptor, I ended up coming back to one of my original designs with the ship that was inspired by things that were said by Doug Chang and George Lucas, which is that Star Wars ships needed to have a bold design. And I really felt like the triple wings, the really flat top, and then like the probe droid style head on the bottom were going to make a pretty bold design, in my opinion. And so I ended up going with that and using my patrons voted on design for the Interceptor, which again is coming out. As a matter of fact, I think you can even see some of it behind me, maybe? No, it's hidden. Hidden this time. So the only mechanical feature of this ship, I know, whoa, well, that's going to make things easier. One of the main mechanical, or the only mechanical part of my ship, for which I'm fairly well known for, including, is the droid's head itself, which can actually rotate a full 360 degrees underneath the canopy piece. Now, it actually fell off when I dropped it, but I actually wanted to take it off to show you guys the droid head underneath here. So it is inspired heavily by the Imperial probe droid. So on the front, we've got a whole bunch of different eyes, sensor pods, and antennas that help keep track of the battlefield and can relay that information back to Central Command to update their holotables. It has 2 laser cannons, one on each side, and while they are small and rapid firing, they can overwhelm ships quite easily with the quick bursts of fire, in my design opinion. The other cool part about the way that it rotates is if I stick the top back on here, it's kind of hard to reach. There we go, perfect. The other cool part is that when you turn it around inside, the guns actually do clear the wings. So it makes it very cool because as it flies, it can strafe targets without having to adjust its vector, which is pretty awesome. On the back side, you can actually see there's 2 ion thrusters. Those are the trans red pieces there. And then a single exhaust out the back. So the ion thrusters would be powered through the solar collectors on the wings, and then supplemented by some internal power cells just inside the droid head that also ran the cannons. Now the red outline of the wings is not just cosmetic for the final order, but also has another purpose as well, and that is that it's actually made from a different material, a much stronger material than the normal Durasteel. And that was because it helped deflect blaster fire, but also allowed this ship to ram other ships. And anytime it came in contact, it would be able to cut right through it. So this ship would actually be able to come through and ram itself into other ships, and which I thought was a pretty cool idea and would be a fun visual to see in the Star Wars movies. So I did imagine that a single Javelin would be flanked on either side by 2 of these guys, forming a sort of mini squad reminiscent of Vader's 2 wingmen from A New Hope. I think they look great together, and in the end, I think I came up with a pretty good solution of combining both the Doctrine of the Empire with a cheap, reliable swarm fighter that's easily replaced, but also keeping in mind the fact that it's hard to get pilots. So I think the droid idea was absolutely perfect, and I want to thank again the Templin Institute, they're here on YouTube, for coming up with that idea. It was brilliant, and it really inspired me to go down this awesome rabbit hole. So I know I said that you'd have 2 of these guys flanking a Javelin, and the reason I said that is because I actually did build two of these guys. So that I can at least display it at Brick Slopes or just here in the Lego room with having both of these wingmen on either side of the Javelin. As a little side note, I also found out that I can attach these to the bottom of the Wrath if I remove the other engine pods. However, when they come off, the red detail on the top wing tended to pull off because of the way it's put together. But it still fits. Maybe I'll be able to build a mount for it to be able to carry those into battle in the future, since these obviously do not have any kind of a hyperdrive like the traditional TIE fighters. Oh, yeah, oh man, I'm so happy with how it turned out, you guys. Just as a quick side note, the instructions are available right now on rebrickable.com. I actually put them out quite a ways before the video comes out to everybody. So if you follow me on Rebrickable, you already saw this and could pick up the instructions. The instructions are free, so you're welcome, Galaxy. And the other reason I built two of them is because you can actually get enough of the specialty wing pieces, those really awesome new wing pieces that only came in the Sith TIE Fighter. It has enough of them to build two of these droid starfighters. Obviously, you need a lot more pieces besides that, but the pieces should be a lot easier to source than the Javelin or the Wrath, especially since we know that the set is retiring. It's going to be a big bummer for everybody, and another reason why I'm working on that Interceptor as quick as possible so that I can get that out and get the instructions out, and so it's not going to be horribly expensive for everybody to be able to pick up the pieces needed for it. Anyway, thank you guys so much for hanging out here in TJ's Lego Room. I'm really excited about the way that the Final Order fleet is coming together. Like I said, I'm hoping that sometime in August I'll be able to release the instructions and the final build for the Interceptor, so stay tuned. And until we see you next time in TJ's Lego Room, play well. Bye.